What happens when a widowed veteran simply wants to hunt on his own land but becomes the target of a self-proclaimed HOA queen? You won't believe how one man with no connections, no army, but with a history turns the whole system upside down. What happened next became a real lesson for those who tried to rewrite someone else's destiny. Let me tell you something straight from the get-go. I wasn't bothering nobody. I'm 63 years old. Widowed. Served my time in the Marines. Raised 2 kids who turned out better than I deserved. Paid off my mortgage, built my home with my own 2 hands, and every fall, when the air gets crisp and the leaves start falling like little golden coins from heaven, I grab my old rifle, lace up my boots, and head out into those Georgia woods. Not for sport. Not for ego. Just peace. Solitude. Connection. That's all I was doing the morning Karen Henderson decided to climb up out of the HOA headquarters of hell and declare war on me. It started like any normal Saturday. I was up before dawn, watching the steam rise off my coffee while Rusty, my old bloodhound, snored by the door. The woods behind my property were still dark, wrapped in that blue-gray light just before sunrise, the kind of quiet that feels like church. I loaded my pack, slung my rifle over my shoulder, and stepped out into the cold with a smile on my face. First time I'd felt calm in weeks. No phones. No bills. Just me in the trees. I'd been using the same deer blind for nearly 25 years. Built it myself when my son was still in high school. Just a plywood box on stilts, nothing fancy, but sturdy, safe, and deep enough in the woods that you couldn't hear the highway. You could hear your own thoughts out there. That's rare these days. But I hadn't even made it halfway to the blind when I heard it. Excuse me. Excuse me. Lord, give me strength. Out from behind a patch of pines came this woman, short hair, sunglasses, clipboard in hand like she was trying out for Judge Judy. She had on a fleece jacket with Oak Haven HOA embroidered on the chest and a look on her face like I just spit on her begonias. Are you hunting out here? I looked down at my rifle. Looked back at her. Blinked. Ma'am, I said, already knowing where this was going, this is my land. Actually, it's not. She stepped forward like she owned the dirt under her shoes. You are currently in the Oak Haven Environmental Protection Zone and hunting is strictly prohibited within the HOA limits. Now, I've been called patient. I've been called easygoing. I raise toddlers, so I know how to handle irrational screaming. But this woman? She tested me. Ma'am, my family's owned this land since 1958. You can see the deed inside my house. And there ain't no HOA out here. She sniffed like the air offended her. Mr. McGrady recently sold several acres to Oak Haven Development. This forest now falls under their jurisdiction. It's being rezoned as a wildlife preservation corridor. Wildlife preservation? I laughed. Lady, I've seen more squirrels run over by HOA golf carts than anywhere else in Georgia. She didn't laugh. She pulled out her phone. I'm calling the sheriff. And just like that, my morning piece turned into a hot bowl of HOA nonsense. Sheriff Peterson showed up 20 minutes later. Nice guy. We'd gone to high school together. He walked up slow, hat in hand, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Roy, he said, sighing. You know I hate this part. Then don't do it, I shot back, already feeling the heat rise in my chest. You know this land is mine. Ain't no HOA ever set foot on it till today. He rubbed his jaw. Technically, the expansion of Oak Haven crosses the old property line. They've got some kind of conservation initiative going. It's all tied up in zoning contracts and regional agreements. You listening to yourself? I cut him off. You saying a woman with a clipboard can walk up on a man's property and tell him he's trespassing on his own woods? He didn't answer. Didn't have to. They issued me a warning. Said next time it'd be a citation. Karen stood behind them, arms crossed, like she was watching a courtroom drama unfold. Like she just won. I watched her leave and I swear I could hear the smug in her footsteps. That was just the beginning. Next morning, I found signs nailed to trees all along the path I'd cleared myself 30 years ago. No trespassing private HOA land, violators will be reported. Some were spray-painted over my old trail markers. Later that week, they filed a formal complaint with the county. Claimed I was endangering the community with firearms activity. Then came the letter, thick envelope, big bold letters, Oak Haven Compliance Division. Inside? A demand to dismantle my deer blind, a map showing HOA-adopted boundaries, and a bill for $275 in compliance processing fees. You ever felt rage so deep it didn't make noise? I sat there, paper trembling in my hands, heart pounding like a bass drum. This wasn't just Karen being annoying. This was war. The next time I saw her, I was loading feed into my truck. She strutted up the driveway like she was inspecting troops. Mr. Matthews, she said, all polite venom, you're in violation of the community ordinance. Community? I growled. You mean the one that didn't exist until your husband bought up half the county and started calling himself a developer? She blinked. We're revitalizing the neighborhood. Bringing standards. Order. Harmony. You're bringing control, I snapped. You're walking into people's lives, rewriting their history and calling it progress. Her smile faltered for a second. Then she pulled herself back up, chin high. You can either adapt or be left behind. She turned and walked away like she just dropped the mic. Oh, but I wasn't done. The next few weeks were a blur of nonsense. Random inspections. Letters from lawyers. One day I came home to find a drone buzzing over my backyard. Guess who was flying it? I called the sheriff. They called it property surveillance. I went to the county office. They handed me a brochure. Karen? She went on a podcast. A podcast. Talking about how they reclaimed dangerous land from reckless behavior. Said they were building a model neighborhood for Georgia's future. Let me tell you something, when somebody tries to erase you from your own story and sell it back to you with a smile, that ain't progress. That's robbery in a polo shirt. I sat on my porch that night, staring out at the trees. Rusty laid his head on my foot, quiet as ever. And I thought about my wife, how we used to sit out here every fall and listen to the wind rustle through the leaves. This land was all I had left. I wasn't about to give it up to a woman with a clipboard and a god complex. No, not like this. What happened next changed everything. You don't want to miss how this all unfolds. Stick around, because when the heat rises, somebody's gonna get burned. They say when folks poke the bear, they best be ready to run. Well, I ain't the running type. And they didn't poke a bear, they poked an old Marine with a bloodhound, a lifetime of patience worn thin, and nothing left to lose but pride and pine trees. After Karen's HOA hit me with that compliance letter, I thought that would be the worst of it. I was wrong. That was just the amuse-bouche. The real meal? That started with a chainsaw. A bright orange chainsaw, a county permit nailed to a tree, and the sound of something sacred falling. It was a Thursday morning. The kind of Georgia morning where the air sticks to your neck and the bugs fly like they got something to prove. I was fixing the hinges on my tool shed when I heard it, a hard, mechanical growl that didn't belong to any wildlife I knew. I stepped out and squinted toward the tree line. Then I saw it. 2 men in yellow vests, one with a chainsaw, the other with a clipboard. And behind them? Karen. Standing back like she didn't want to break a sweat, arms folded, sunglasses on, as if she was supervising a backyard barbecue. I stormed toward them. Hey! I shouted. What the hell do you think you're doing? Chainsaw man paused mid-cut. Clipboard guy turned around with that fake calm tone that always means trouble. Sir, we have authorization from the HOA to clear hazardous overgrowth near the new fence line. Fence line? I barked. This here's my backyard. Karen stepped forward then like the queen of the harvest. Mr. Matthews, the new HOA map includes a safety perimeter to protect the wildlife corridor. You can keep your house, of course, but the bordering forest must be made accessible for community upkeep. I felt something behind my ribs crackle. Let me get this straight, I said slowly. You're cutting down my trees, on my land, to make it safer for deer, for me? She smiled like that was supposed to make sense. We're restoring balance. You'll thank us eventually. Oh, I almost did thank her. With a shovel to the tire of her Lexus. The next few days felt like being boxed into a corner with velvet ropes. Karen's HOA hit me with fines for unauthorized use of rural equipment, my tractor, visual obstruction, my deer blind, which they couldn't even see unless they were trespassing, and community disturbance. My neighbor's teenage grandson playing soul music in his truck too loud, which of course somehow became my problem. I tried to file a complaint. The county clerk looked at me like I just walked in wearing a tinfoil hat. Sir, the HOA has jurisdiction over aesthetics and land use in that sector now. It's not a sector. It's my backyard. According to the updated overlays from the developer. I cut her off. You mean the same developer who donated $5,000 to the county commissioner's campaign? She blinked. I'm not at liberty to discuss donations, sir. Of course you ain't. I left the office with a headache and a folder full of red tape. I went home to find a citation taped to my door. This time, they were threatening to report me to the Environmental Board for harmful soil practices. Know what that was about? My compost pile. You ever get so mad your teeth itch? I tried to reason with Karen one last time. I caught her while she was planting flowers by the entrance sign, probably tulips she made someone else pay for. Look, I said. You win. You've buried me in paperwork, embarrassed me in my own neighborhood, turned the woods into your little nature museum. What do you want from me? She didn't even pause. Compliance, she said, brushing dirt off her gloves. Adaptability. We're creating a future here, Mr. Matthews. You're clinging to the past. It's time to evolve. I stared at her. Just stared. Like maybe if I looked hard enough, I'd find a trace of humanity. Something behind the HOA smirk and Patagonia fleece. Nothing. Just ambition wearing lipstick. That night, I went to see my neighbor Vince Ramsey. Vietnam vet. Man who knew something about standing your ground. He poured me a glass of rye and listened to the whole story without interrupting once. When I finished, he leaned back and said, "You know what's wrong with these folks? What's that? They think owning a clipboard gives 'em soul." I laughed harder than I had in weeks. Then I stopped. Because he was right. Karen and her crew weren't just trying to enforce rules. They were trying to erase identity. Wipe out everything that made this land a home and turn it into a brochure. And I ain't built for brochures. A few days later, something happened that shifted everything. Something small. Simple. But enough to light a fire in me I hadn't felt in years. I was walking rusty near the edge of the property line when I saw a boy, no more than 12, sitting on a log, holding a little handmade bow. He looked scared when he saw me, like he was expecting to get yelled at. "You huntin'?" I asked. He nodded. "Tryin' to." I smiled. "You any good?" He grinned. "Missed twice, but I saw a buck last week." He was just standing there, looking at me like he knew I couldn't hit him. We both laughed. "You come out here often?" "Used to," he said, face falling. "My dad says we can't anymore. The HOA lady said it's not safe." That did it. That was the moment. "You mess with me? Fine. You cut down my trees? I'll plant new ones." But when you take the woods from a kid, when you steal something that pure, that's when you lose the right to call yourself progress. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on my porch with a notebook, a pot of coffee, and every land document I had in a box from 1962. My daddy's will. The boundary maps. Old surveys. And the name of a woman I hadn't talked to in over a decade, Lewin Carter, real estate lawyer, retired, and my late wife's cousin. Next morning, I called her. "Luann," I said, "you ever heard of Oak Haven HOA?" She snorted on the line. "Honey, they're the country club version of a hostile takeover. I got a situation. And I ain't going down without a fight." There was a pause. Then, "Send me everything. And bring a big cup of patience. We about to dig in. This is it. This is the turning point. Everything you've been waiting for, it's here. Stick around to see what happens when enough is finally enough and a man takes back what's his." You ever feel like the world done lost its mind and you the only one still thinking straight? That's how I felt walking into that lawyer's office, boots still muddy from my land, calluses raw from 30 years of fixing what nobody else would fix. And all around me? Folks in polished loafers and ties, sipping fancy coffee like they were too important to breathe regular air. But I wasn't there for their coffee. I was there to take my life back. Lewin Carter didn't waste time. Soon as I sat down, she hit me with a manila folder like it was a Bible. "Here's what we know, Roy," she said, sliding papers across the desk. "Karen and her HOA are operating under a gray zone that means legally murky, morally filthy. The land your father deeded to you in 1983? Still legally yours. Problem is, they used a loophole." "What kind of loophole?" "Environmental annexation via easement and utility overlays." I blinked. "You just made that up." "Nope." She smirked. "They redrew a boundary line by sliding in under a conservation act. They're claiming stewardship, not ownership. That gives them power to manage land use without fully owning it. Let me break that down in real words. They found a way to pretend they run my land without ever buying a square inch of it. Karen ain't just a nosy neighbor. She's a corporate snake in yoga pants. Luann and I got to work. She taught me how to file a petition, challenge zoning codes, demand a formal survey, things that take more patience than fishing on a dry lake. Meanwhile, Karen kept pushing. She started sending patrols, not real cops, but HOA compliance officers. Grown men in polos carrying clipboards and cheap walkie-talkies, strolling past my fence like they were on safari. One afternoon, I was cutting wood when I heard, "Sir, we've had complaints about unauthorized construction." I turned around slow. "You mean my tool shed? That's been here since '91. HOA standards require external buildings to be approved and visually consistent with community guidelines." I leaned on my axe and smiled. "Well, my guideline is it keeps raccoons out and my chainsaw in. If your standards can beat that, feel free to write M down and mail M to my fire pit." They didn't laugh. But I did. Then they made their big move. They held a community vote to officially integrate my section of the woods into the Oak Haven Reserve. The flyer looked like something from a nature documentary: birds, flowers, the words, "A new chapter for Georgia wildlife." Only problem? Every picture on that flyer came from my trail cams. My trees. My deer. They were using my land to advertise my exclusion. So I did what any self-respecting man would do. I printed a bigger flyer. Same photos, but with bold red letters. Stolen land. Stolen rights. Stolen peace. And I dropped it in every mailbox in Oak Haven. That rattled the hive. Next thing I know, I'm getting calls from neighbors who never spoke to me before, folks with barbecues and porch swings, telling me they'd had enough too. Turns out Karen wasn't just hounding me. She'd fined a woman for having a wind chime. Told a veteran his flag was too bright. This wasn't community building. It was control. HOA-style colonialism. But now folks were waking up. Things came to a head when Karen scheduled a community forum code for a one-woman show with a microphone and a PowerPoint. I showed up early, wore my boots, my camo jacket, and a face that said, "Try me." The room was full of folding chairs and fake smiles. HOA folks sipping sparkling water and pretending they cared about squirrels. Karen walked in like a mayor, all confidence, flanked by her husband and 2 clipboard goons. She started with slides, pie charts, terms like land optimization and eco-corridors. Every time she said safety, I felt my blood pressure climb another inch. Then she opened the floor. I stood up. "I've got a question." She smiled tight. "Yes, Mr. Matthews? How many people here knew this green initiative meant cutting down a dozen 40-year-old trees?" Murmurs in the crowd. "How many of y'all knew that deer blind in the slide was mine? That path was mine? That land was passed down, generation to generation, and now y'all want to tell me how to live on it?" Silence. You call it protection. I call it theft, with a smile. Karen tried to interrupt, but I kept going. This ain't about the environment. It's about control. It's about rewriting rules till no one knows what's real anymore. You're not protecting nature. You're weaponizing it. Half the room clapped. The other half looked like they'd seen a ghost. Karen adjusted the mic. "Mr. Matthews, while we appreciate your passion, the community has spoken." I leaned forward. "Good. Then they won't mind hearing this." I filed a petition with the county. I submitted aerial surveys, legal titles, historic maps, and environmental contradictions. And guess what? I pulled out the manila envelope Lewin gave me. They opened an investigation. The land you claimed? It's under review. And if the county rules in my favor, every tree you cut, every dollar you fined, every sign you posted is gonna come back to bite. Silence. Then murmurs. Then questions. Karen didn't smile anymore. When I left that building, I felt like I could breathe again. But this wasn't over. Later that week, I got a letter from a developer. McGrady, the same man who sold Karen her little empire, wanted to make an offer on my land. Said he could relieve me of the burden and help shape a modern vision. I didn't even open it. I threw it in the fire. Because I wasn't selling. I was just getting started. Everything's boiling now. And what comes next? You do not want to miss it. The final showdown is coming. Stick around. You're about to see what happens when a man takes back his legacy. Let me paint this picture plain and clear. They tried to box me out. Erase my name from land that fed 3 generations of my family. Turn my story into a footnote in their glossy brochure. But today I signed the deed. And the forest, every pine, every creek, every quiet patch where deer still breathe easy, is now mine. Bought. Closed. Sealed. Let me back up. It started 2 weeks after that HOA forum turned into a courtroom. I thought the county would drag their feet like they always do. Bureaucracy loves delay like a turtle swimming through syrup. But this time it moved. Turns out when you shine enough light on rotten roots, even slow systems start paying attention. The investigation into Oak Haven's zoning and annexation practices uncovered more than I ever expected. Turns out McGrady, the developer behind the HOA land grab, had been buying land using LLCs tied to a family trust. And a whole lot of those purchases? They involved pressure tactics, under-the-table agreements, and voluntary compliance forms neighbors didn't even know they signed. Lewin got copies. She printed them out in color, brought them to the zoning board like she was walking into battle. And she didn't miss. The board called a vote. Not only did they halt the expansion of HOA jurisdiction, they revoked the annexation of my bordering property. That meant every fine, every fake policy, every inch of conservation land they claimed on my side of the map, null and void. I thought that would be the end. It wasn't. A week later, Karen showed up on my porch. No clipboard. No sunglasses. Just tight lips and that same heavy perfume that smelled like crushed pine needles and pride. Mr. Matthews, she said, barely able to make eye contact, I came to discuss the future of the area. I raised an eyebrow. You mean the part you no longer control? She cleared her throat. There's still a chance to preserve harmony here. A joint venture. You have influence now. We could partner on public use trails, nature walks, signage, educational programs. I nearly laughed. You think I want to hang little plaques on trees explaining how you almost stole M? She shifted. I admit, things got out of hand. But I was trying to protect the community. Nah, I leaned on the porch rail. You were trying to shape it into something that made you feel important. I just wanted to be left alone. She didn't argue. She knew. And when she walked off my porch, I didn't feel angry. I felt done. Done with fighting people who didn't care to understand. Done with being patient while the world forgot what history meant. Done with begging to exist on my own soil. So I did something nobody expected. I went and bought the whole damn forest. Let me tell you how that happened. Turns out one of McGrady's investment groups fell into debt when another HOA lawsuit froze their assets. They quietly listed a bunch of parcels for private sale, mostly woodland, stuff they couldn't develop without permits. Guess who had the cash? I didn't buy a new truck. Didn't fix up the kitchen. I pulled what I had, called in a favor from my late wife's cousin in Atlanta and bought every acre touching mine. Closed it under my name, no LLCs, transparent. In 3 weeks, I went from troublemaker in the woods to sole legal owner of the land that HOA used to lord over like a kingdom. Yeah? Now I make the rules. The first thing I did was post new signs. Welcome to Matthews Forest, a private stewardship preserve. No HOA jurisdiction. No trespassing without consent. Land owned, not leased. Legacy maintained. I didn't write it in legalese. I wrote it in truth. Second thing I did? I invited the whole neighborhood, even the ones who used to give me side-eye, to a barbecue under the pines. Vince brought his harmonica. The Jackson kids set up fishing rods by the creek. And little Malik, the boy with the homemade bow? I built him a proper target range with hay bales and bullseye markers. We cooked. We laughed. We reclaimed space. No permits. No citations. Just people. Free. Karen didn't show. But I heard she moved out a month later. Word is, she listed her house below market value just to get away from the whispers. Ain't no victory like one that doesn't need shouting. Because here's the thing nobody tells you. Sometimes the fight isn't about winning louder. It's about lasting longer. About standing firm when everybody else folds. About knowing your roots are deeper than their blueprints. About remembering that legacy, real legacy, don't come with a monthly fee and a bylaws packet. It comes with sweat, sacrifice, quiet strength. The forest is quiet again. Not silent, alive. I still hunt when the season comes. Still walk with Rusty. Still sit under that same deer blind, now freshly repaired and freshly legal. But now I do it knowing that what they tried to erase, the land, the memory, the right to exist in peace, is not only still here. It's protected. By me. For whoever comes next. Because in the end, they banned me from hunting. So I bought the forest. And that, my friend, is how you reclaim your name.